Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
So is anybody here?
Well, I'm sitting here with my Victorian teacup, having some tea, and
yes.
I see there's a message.
Courtesy from Miss Haversham, in fact.
Well, I see here. I'm almost finished drinking it, but I see there's a message at the bottom of the cup.
Really? What does it say?
It says, "You are fantastic, a real stud muffin."
Well, here, wait a minute here. I need to drink my tea down a bit, see if I've got one. All right, here you go. Mine says, "You'll never amount to much."
Oh, my goodness. Well, I'm sure the teacups never lie, but I'm sure things will work out, for you as we go along, especially this evening, because we've got two wonderful and somewhat bizarre guests, I do believe, because our show is Exploring the Bizarre, and we are two bizarre hosts, to say the least, and our subjects are often bizarre.
That's right. Well, and I think that before we announce our guest, we should actually give a shout out for our friend Brad Steiger.
Yeah, indeed. Brad has been very ill the last couple of months, and he is in a hospice and unable to communicate with anyone, I understand. Yeah. I've been in touch with Sherry Steiger, and she has asked for our prayers, which, of course, we would give anyway. Brad has been well, to me, I call him Brother Brad, and he calls me Brother Tim. Mm-hmm. He is just such a great, wonderful, humble person who has brought much enlightenment and entertainment to the world of the paranormal. I don't think that there could possibly be a person living, or some that are not living, perhaps, who does not have at least one or more Brad Steiger books in their library. My goodness, Tim, he's written well over 200 on a multitude of subjects, and I first met Brad in 1967, and we've hooked up many, many times since then, when he was living in the Phoenix area. And a couple of years ago, we even sang Christmas carols together there in Iowa on the lake. In fact, you could
the frozen lake.
Oh, well, it's slippery frozen lake with Diane Tessman and Sherry were there, and we sang Christmas carol amidst the Christmas lights in the middle of the town. All right, here I am.
Here we go. Oh, that looks nice. Hey, that looks so pretty. That looks so pretty.
Old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind.
All right.
Old acquaintance be forgot and la.
And it's actually on YouTube somewhere. I guess type in Brad Steiger Christmas carols, and you can hear us sing well out of tune. Our writing is much better than our singing, but that's what it is. And we do wish Brad the best, and if possible, miraculous recovery. And God bless you, Sherry. And we hope for the best, Tim.
Yeah. Well, and if anybody wants to send their wishes to Brad, I guess that maybe send them to your Facebook page or
Yeah,
post
that
them on
was.
their own.
I'm under. Yeah, I'm under Tim Beckley, and I think between my page and the Coast to Coast page, we've had over 600. What do they call them? Comments or people put in faces and different things, which don't seem to apply all the time to whatever it is you're trying to get across.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, you get a 500 smiling faces, but that's not really what people mean. I suspect.
No, but at least Brad will know that people are thinking about him.
Absolutely, and I am forwarding everything on to Sherry. So, Brad, we send you the best. We only the best for you, man. Only the best. So, Tim, on with the show. The show must go on, and I think tonight we've got quite a show. So, why don't you kick it in gear and tell our listeners what they have in store?
Oh, definitely. Well, and I think that the post that I made earlier about this show. With the headline, fits tonight's program really well. And that is, I tried to be good, but I got bored. So that's the way that we're going to approach tonight's show. And we have with us tonight Melissa Johnson and Sheila Parker. Now, Melissa Johnson, who is also known as Miss Haversham, says that she wants to be the goth Martha Stewart. She's descended from antique dealers, grew up at flea markets, and some say she was even born at a garage sale. Johnson upholds the passion for decaying elegance shared by all the women in her family. It's an obsession that manifests itself in a love of antiques, horror movies, Halloween, taxidermy, old books, and abandoned places. And she's developed and produced television for clients such as The Colbert Report, the Disney Channel, Playhouse Disney, PBS, Nickelodeon, MTV, VH1 Comedy Channel, the Cartoon Network. It just it goes on. And she's currently working on a book-length memoir called Our Private Business, which she hopes is a running with scissors, but with Arabs in Ohio. So now Melissa is a horror movie fanatic, a junk scavenger, and a lover of all things weird, creepy, and haunted. So she should fit in very well with us here on Exploring the Bizarre.
Well, Mr. Creepo loves her already.
I knew.
Remember, don't forget our horror movies. In fact, one of them is finally up on Amazon, but not on Prime because it's too risque. So you have to pay 99 cents to watch it. It's Sandy Hook Lingerie Party Massacre, starring Debbie Rochon.
There you go. Yeah, and I guess you have to do a little searching to find it because Amazon's not making it easy.
No, well, I think they have 80 or 90,000 movies up there, but this isn't Prime because it's too risque. Heaven forbid there might be a vampire or two lurking in the woods, topless or whatever.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, shock. Yeah. All right. So now our other guest tonight is Sheila Parker. Now Sheila is a writer, artist, and empath, and she is an expert on all things paranormal. Sheila's blog and popular speaking engagements delve deeply into the power of the mind and spirit. Sheila is followed by thousands of people eager to hear her words about the mostly undiscovered world of spirits, ghosts, and gifts, and being open to the unknown. Sheila is an internationally acclaimed poet and the author of the novel The Spirit Within, an intoxicating story of betrayed love with a unique supernatural twist. And I have to admit that going to her blog, I love her poetry. On our website at KCOR, there's a link to both our guests' websites, so be sure to check out Sheila's blog and especially check out Melissa's article, I Was a Child Bride for Satan. So Melissa, Sheila, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
Well, thank you for having us. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Tim, why don't you get the satanic cuffs off Melissa, or maybe she'd like him on, and get into the question again.
Yeah, definitely. Well, with Melissa, I first ran across her website called Miss Haversham's Curiosities, and from her article called "I Was a Child Bride of Satan." Now, how could anybody resist that title? I mean, that drew me in right away, and then of course, everything else on her site was just gravy for me. So, Melissa, I think that reading that article, I think it really is a great description about your early days and how you got started and really how you became the person you are today. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to write that article?
Well, I thought it would be funny to sort of highlight my family's dubious parenting skills a little bit. Both my grandmother and my mother had some quirky ideas about what was age appropriate and what wasn't, and I'm so glad they did, because I was exposed to horror movies very, very young, and I loved them. I think a lot of kids probably would be scarred, and maybe I am a little scarred. You guys can judge that. But I love them, and I got addicted very early. And, I always had this sort of creepy side to me when I was a kid. And when I was, I don't know, probably third grade, I believe, we went to a garage sale, which was what we did every single weekend that I can ever remember. And while we were there, I was wandering around, and I came across a book. And it was the very first volume of Man, Myth, and Magic. And so if you're not familiar with that book or that series, it's an entire collection of paranormal books that, similar to Time Life, that sort of walks the layperson through the basic topics of the supernatural and the paranormal. So when you're that young, you're instantly drawn to something that's, creepy and bad and forbidden. So I wanted that book, and my grandmother, without batting an eye, bought it for me, and I was instantly hooked. So that was sort of the gateway drug to creepy things for me.
Yeah, I had that entire series myself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it was kind of like you. I think I ran across my first copy, like at a garage sale or something like that, and then slowly over the years collected the rest of them. The same way, at bookstores and consignment centers and things like that. So yeah, I could see how. Back in 1983, that would draw you in. So your grandmother bought it for you, but now what was your mom's reaction to getting that book?
Well, it's funny because I'm not sure how I got it past her into the house, but I managed to. And, I had it for a very long time, and my mother didn't really have a problem with the supernatural or anything like that. She let me watch horror movies. It was the nudity in the books that really bothered her. So I don't, the books themselves are like a Dario Argento movie come to life. Like they're just, they're of a period in time when, everyone sort of wanted to know a little bit about the paranormal, and it was maybe a little bit sexy, but it wasn't mainstream yet. And so, yeah, she took it away from me. She hid it. Of course, she hid it where she hid everything, which was under the couch. So, I dug it out whenever I could when she wasn't around, and I poured over it. And, it became an obsession. And when you take something away from a kid, I think they want it more. So It just cemented my obsession with anything creepy.
Hey, I just want to interject here. I hear it sounds like somebody rustling in the coffin or something. So I don't know what is causing that, but perhaps we can nail the coffin down for the time being. So we get a very, very good audio. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, this is. We were talking about Brad Steiger earlier in the program, and it was Brad's books, I think, that got me started into all of this. Voices from Beyond, I think, was the first one that I ever bought of Brad's at a very early age. So, I mean, it's funny how all of us, I think, we're influenced by a book that then took us into the dark side, so to speak. Wouldn't you say, Tim?
Well, indeed. Well, I always tell people, and they look at me in bewilderment, how I got, of course, being Mr. Creepo and all, I have a fond interest in horror films. People say, well, how did you get involved in that aspect of filmmaking and all? And I blame it all on Nancy Reagan. Now, I know that might sound strange, because what does Nancy have to do with horror movies? Do you know, Melissa?
I don't, but I really want to.
Okay. Well, Nancy Reagan, before she was Nancy Reagan, was Nancy Davis. And she appeared in a movie, a black and white film called Donovan's Brain. And Donovan's Brain was playing one night on late night TV. And I don't know how old I was, but my mother would not allow me to stay up to watch this fantastic artsy movie. But from my bedroom across the hall, I could hear the pumping of the brain. Pa-pump, 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 pa-pump. After that, I had to sleep with a nightlight on. It jostled me so much. I don't know, but years later, I went back to watch the movie because I thought it would bring back some childhood memories, and it lasted for like 10 minutes before I gave up, realizing that I was sucker punched.
No, it didn't hold up.
It didn't work from I don't know, maybe it was made in 1956 or something to 1969 or 1970. But every time I think of the Reagans these days, I think of Donovan's Brain and the pumping of the brain in the jar. So that's how Mr. Creepo became alive. And I've always said I'm not quite so fascinated with the horror movies anymore. They seem to be that they've slipped downhill. I don't know if you would agree or not, but I like things like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Day the Earth Stood Still, which wasn't as much a horror movie; it was a science fiction. The Thing, from under the ice. But today's movies seem to be, there's a lot of blood and a lot of lust, and I don't even I could even fancy that. But the stories just are preposterous. I know some people would say, well, ghost stories are preposterous anyway, but I like a more conventional movie, and the movies never seem to end. Even when all the spooking is over, they've still got to carry on for another 15 or 20 minutes, adding like an optional ending to it. So I would rather read your the teacups. But now, when did you get? How did you get hooked into that? I mean, that's a pretty. Most people, I mean, if they're into tea, they're reading the tea leaves.
Yeah. So I, as a horror movie fanatic, I would go to a lot of horror cons and Monsterpalooza and things like that. And when I would walk through, I loved them, but there was never anything really there for women of a certain age, so to speak, and of a certain, taste. So I like classy things. I like pretty things. I also like scary things. And so where were the elegant or finely crafted things for women like me? So that kind of was part of the inspiration. The other inspiration was my grandmother, who was an antiques dealer, and her specialty was glassware and china. And so, I kind of grew up around it. We always went to garage sales. We always, went to estate sales and auctions. And, it was in my blood from a very young age. I loved it. So that was really the inspiration. She took whatever she had lying around the house, all of her mismatched pieces, and she would paint little grumpy things inside them with nail polish sometimes. And so I remember her doing that. She was a complicated lady, not the happiest of people, but that was her outsider art and the way she expressed herself. So that was really the combination of the two things were really my inspiration for starting the teacups.
So now was that actually a thing though with say like Victorian teacups? That did some of them have messages, or is this just something unique that you and your grandmother came up with?
Well, I remember my grandmother always doing it. I certainly am not the first person to have ever put something grumpy inside a teacup or a coffee cup. I'm sure whoever wrote Over the Hill was probably the first one.
How grumpy do you get?
Pretty grumpy. Yeah. I could send you a few more.
Give us an example.
I would say my favorite one is We Hate Your Baby, which is pretty direct.
Oh,
I love that.
It's rather popular with parents.
That'll even get you thrown off of Facebook.
It probably could, yeah.
Uh-huh.
But you have to know your audience. You have to make sure that you're giving it to somebody who actually would appreciate it and not someone who would really be offended by it. At least that's my intention.
I would think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have a twisted sense of humor. Not everyone does, and that's fine.
Now, have you acted in any horror movies? Have you been on the screen?
No, I have not. No. I'm a writer and a television producer.
Oh, okay. Well, if we were still producing Mr. Creepo's vignettes, we would offer you a high paid position, right, Tim?
That's
I will send you a resume.
That's right. Well, but I see though that Stephen Colbert really got a big kick out of Miss Hammershand's insult cups.
Yeah, that was a really happy little accident. Corey Schaub, who is a producer on the Tea for Tuesday segment that Stephen does I guess he does it every week. Sometimes he skips a week. And he really liked my teacups. He bought a set of 6 of them for Stephen, and Stephen loved them, and so they just started appearing on his show. So Corey would bring out a cup of tea for Stephen, and Stephen would take a sip of it and talk about the tea and the flavor and the nuances of the tea. And then he'd look down and he would see the message, and he would show the message to everyone. So yeah, he likes them. It's great. And I love Stephen Colbert. He's the greatest.
Oh yeah. So
very, very funny.
Did you see an uptick in business then after your cup started appearing on your show?
A
little, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And if people come to you and ask for say their own unique messages, so to speak, can you put this in there?
Mm-hmm. I do custom occasionally. I like to keep it classy, so there are certain things I won't put on a teacup. I like them to sort of stay within a snotty old lady language, like something that the Dowager Countess would say.
Yeah, kind of like passive aggressive type.
Exactly. That's right.
All right. All right. Well, we have to go to our bottom of the hour break here. So when we come back, we'll continue our conversation on exploring the bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
I do often warn people to be careful when they jump in the chat room because it is a low ceiling in there. But other than that, you're free to frolic among the other crazies and bizarros and so forth. Sheila, so how are you?
Yes.
Where are we talking? Where are we talking to you from?
I am on the Gulf Coast in Alabama, just north of Gulf Shores.
And things are lively there as far as the paranormal goes?
Well, actually, this area is pretty rich with the history of, like it dates back, pre-Civil War and everything. So, I mean, I'm about an hour east of, I mean, not even an hour away from Mobile, from, 3 hours east of New Orleans and all that. So you guys know how far that dates back, way, way, way back, like 200-300 years ago, with like New Orleans, with Mardi Gras and things like that. So there's a lot of history down here. So, yeah. It's a lot of fun. Lots of really cool historical sites.
And what is your background? Well, I mean, do you consider yourself a paranormal researcher, or a ghost hunter, or just a spooky person?
Weird person, definitely. I am proud to say that. When I was younger, I wouldn't have been so open about that, but I'm definitely a spooky, weird person, and I hope, openly embrace that. But as far as being a paranormal researcher, I definitely am. I'm a paranormal investigator. I don't normally go on investigations. Have I been on investigations? I have, but to classify myself as an investigator is not something that I do, because I don't have all of the investigative equipment. But I am a researcher.
Don't need a lot of times. You don't need all that equipment.
That is very true. And being an empath, there are lots of us, that are, with the abilities and stuff like that. We actually use our own abilities as tools, if you will, to conduct investigations and things. So I have been on a couple of investigations, at some pretty neat locations that, I'm honored to say that I've been, because I've been to the Beauvoir House in Biloxi. I've been to the Palmer Hotel in Minnesota, in Sauk Center, Minnesota, and they're both prevalent for their paranormal activity. Pretty interesting finds that, were discovered, and it's pretty cool. And I'm going to another location in June, so I'm really excited about that. But, I just have fun with it, and because I do love to learn about things. I've been, involved with the paranormal all my life because I've had experiences myself.
Well, tell us about a couple. Yeah. Well, tell us about a couple of them. We want to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was barely a teenager, I saw my first shadow person. I know a lot of people probably, would sit there and say, no, your eyes are just playing tricks on you and what have you. But when I was barely a teenager, I know what I seen. It was a shadow figure, like a person right outside of my eye. It stayed there it seemed like forever, and it terrified me, but then it vanished. And since then, it's been, decades past. I still see, the shadow people periodically, but I'm not afraid of them anymore because I've gotten so used to them. I think that they're more like observers, to where other people would sit there and view them as, like demonic entities or a presence like that. And I think a lot of that is based on people's misunderstanding of what the figures might be. And, it's based on fear of, what society says that they are as well. But my own personal experience, I'm never, afraid when I see one. I just basically brush it off now. Because, since I first saw my first, when I was like 12 years old, I'm 42 now. And, I don't fear them anymore because of all the research that I've done throughout the years. That's what I always tell people, research things, that can actually help eliminate, fear.
Now, you say that you're an empath. What exactly is an empath?
An empath, for my own personal being, it is one who can sense the emotions from other people, dead or living. I can feel other people's emotions. Like when I walk into a room, I can automatically sense the negativity without even talking to somebody or without even looking at somebody. I can feel their energy. And if it's a really good energy, I mirror that person's energy, if that makes sense. I feel energetic. I feel upbeat. If I feel somebody's negative energy, it automatically gets me in my center gut, and it makes me feel weighed down. That's, it was something that I always had, throughout my life. And when I was a kid, I didn't really understand what it meant. But, it just, as I got older, that was the reason why it was called weird, because I would always, pick up other people's emotions. And people were always like, Sheila, you're so weird, because one minute you're happy, the next minute, you get really, really quiet. Next minute, and I'm like, well, no, it's because, I feel all these different emotions and everything. But when I was younger, I just didn't really understand it until I got older, and I became I was becoming more aware of what I had as the ability. And I started talking to other people about it and becoming more open and it's really a neat gift to have. I used to consider it as a curse, but now I'm really glad to have it because it actually helps me to assess situations, that I should stay away from.
I would think at times, though, that it would just be soul wearying, especially if you're having to hang around, say, with somebody for an extended period of time who maybe just has a negative attitude, all the time.
Definitely, because that can be very weighing on the mind, and it can take its toll on me sometimes. And speaking with other empaths and everything, they say the same thing. So that's why it's so important for anyone with disability to be able to, protect themselves. And because, like when somebody asks me about it, I always tell them that I create a bubble, if you will, for, lack of better wording, a bubble of white light protection. And that kind of helps keep me protected from negative energy. So even if I'm away around it, it keeps the negative energy away from me. So it's not absorbed into me and drags me down, because it's like an energy vampire, because there are energy vampires that hook you in, and drains you and everything. It can be very taxing on the person's, spirit and their well-being.
That's funny that you would say that, because I was just thinking, I've known several people, in my life who were very empathetic, and they have admitted to me that, and both of these people have told me this without knowing the other person, and they just practically have told me the same kind of stories, that they, through their life have been targeted, for want of a better word, by people that they said were energy vampires. And they, they said that, some of these people were well aware that that's what they were. And then other people, it just was almost like a natural ability, but they had no idea, that maybe subconsciously, that they were drawing energy from other people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think some people feed on that just for their own sole purpose, while others stay away from it, because, I would never take someone else's energy away from them, because to me, that's just wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are some of the earliest things that led you to believe that there was an invisible ghostly world or a parallel universe? Or how exactly do you see these invisible? I don't mean necessarily see them, but how do you think of them as the ghosts and the goblins and the specters?
The alternate realities.
Okay. Well, it's really trippy, though, because when I was really, really little, just barely school age, not even really, the first, if you will call it a supernatural experience, to me, it was just natural thing that happened to me that really stood out was, it was a Sunday afternoon. Church had just released, and everybody was congregating right outside the church door, getting ready to leave for the day. And I was drawn just a few feet away from the church front door to the nearby cemetery. Okay. And it was still on the same property, well protected, cars were around. I wasn't going to get hurt. But I could sense, like a smell. And it wasn't anybody else's perfume or anything, because, people do wear perfume cologne and things like that. But it wasn't that. I was drawn to a certain fragrance out into the cemetery. And so I was, just like stepping towards this one particular grave, and I walked to it, and I was a little girl, like I said, and I just kind of got drawn to it by myself, meandering all the way to it. And as I got closer and closer to this headstone, the fragrance got stronger and stronger. And keep in mind, this was an older, tombstone, gravesite, if you will, and no family members were buried there. So I don't know why I was drawn to that particular one spot. But as I got closer to the spot, the fragrance got stronger and stronger. And then I got closer and closer because I wanted to smell it even more. As I got closer to the ground, I started seeing these images of the skeleton. And it wasn't scary to me or anything like that. But then right before I realized, my nose was just inches above the grass. And I wanted so badly to take my hand and just dig into it. And that's when my grandmother saw me, and she stopped me. And that has always stuck in my mind ever since then. And like I said, I was barely school age at that time. But I was so intrigued with what my mind's eye was seeing and what my extra sense was smelling. I wanted more. And I know that sounds really macabre and just crazy, but the essence of death didn't frighten me. It didn't scare me or anything. And ever since then, every time I see a graveyard, it just makes me think of that one particular moment in my life. And to me, it's a very beautiful thing. And I know, like I said, that sounds really just morbid and creepy, but to me, and that fragrance has been something that has always stuck with me, and I've never smelled it again since then. It was like an older era type, perfume, something light, something fragrant, something beautiful. And like I said, I kept on seeing that skeleton ever since, every time I was getting closer and closer to the grave. But I remember it just as clear as a bell, and that was, gosh, more than 35 years ago.
Joshua Cutchin would have loved that story.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I just recently came out about that like a little over a year ago, because to me, it took me a while to even speak out about it because, well, I was so young and, just in fear of saying things, for the family's sake and stuff, because it was about church and stuff like that. I just didn't want to, like get anybody mad or anything, but I finally, spoke out about it. And ever since then, people have become so intrigued about that. And so it was just definitely scary to me. Not really scary, but it was definitely interesting to me.
Well, what has been the feeling from your family members or or people that you met? I mean, are you pretty open about talking about these things?
Oh, I am now. I mean, my life is an open book. Anybody wants to know something, I'll be more than happy to tell you. But when I was growing up, I wasn't that way because of, growing up with a religious background and everything like that. We didn't necessarily talk about certain things just because, that's just not what you did down here in the South. And, but now that I'm an adult, I'm my own person, I'm in control of who I am and, my own life. I don't fear anything anymore, and my life's an open book. So if anybody has any kind of like questions about my experiences, I openly talk about them.
Well, knowing the attitude a lot of times when it comes to the paranormal and ghosts and ghoulies and things that go bump in the night, especially down south and there in the Bible Belt,
Right.
and I know that it can run hot or cold. When it comes to opinions from people, because you have people like us who are really interested, and then you have the others who is like, oh my God, you're a demon straight from hell.
Yep, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I got told yesterday by somebody walking up to my door just randomly, trying to impose his beliefs on me. And I told him I didn't believe like him. And he told me I'm going to go to hell because of that. And I'm like, that's interesting. But yeah, I'm told that periodically, but I just brush it off because, I'm open-minded and I just stick with that. So, I can't let other people's beliefs, impose on mine. So I'm good.
But this was a guy who just came to your door trying to push his religion on you.
Yeah.
I mean, he had no idea about your background or anything like that.
No, not at all. None whatsoever. And when I openly told him, he was an elderly man, and you could tell he was from, with all due respect, the old school type stuff. And he had two young guys with him that were barely 12, 13 years old, and that were cute, dressed up in their Sunday's finest. And, I opened the door. I didn't even know it because we were eating dinner, my family and I, and then we heard, my doorbell chimed. And so I opened up the door. Here's this cute little old dude with his glasses on, and he's got his shirt's buttoned up, and he's like, hi, how are you? And, and I'm like, I did talk to him for a minute, because I'm not going to be rude. And so he proceeds to reach into his little shirt pocket, pulls out this little pamphlet, and I stopped him politely, told him I wasn't interested in what he had to offer. And he goes, why is that? You don't believe? And I said, no, not necessarily like you do. And he goes, well, you're going to go straight to hell then. And I said, oh, well, then that's your belief, not mine. And I'm sitting there, I'm smiling at him because I'm looking at the two kids, and it felt so bad for them because they look like they're 10 shades of awkward, and they're like, And I look at them like, hey, how are you doing? And I look back at the gentleman. I said, you guys have a nice day. And he's like, okay. And he's still trying to talk to me, but then he realizes he has no grounds with that. So he's like, okay, you have a nice day too. Then I shut the door and they left.
Well,
yeah.
do you believe in hell?
Well, that's the thing, though. I'm not a Christian. I'm a Wiccan.
Oh.
So I'm a white witch.
And what? Okay, well, that's a kind of another subject there. How did you? I knew Ray Buckland when he lived here in New York. He was one of the first to go public with being a Alexandrian. I think he was witch. And we used to. Well, of course, I had one of the first metaphysical centers in the country, the New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences, and it was pretty active even in those days. There were the occultists like myself, and then there were the well, I don't know if you would call we'll call them witchcraft groups, but they weren't all. They certainly weren't all Wiccan. I mean, there was a lot of different groups, and some of them, I think, tried to actually disguise themselves as being Wiccan, so as not to cause a great deal of controversy. Have you ever heard of the Process Church?
No, I haven't. I'll have to
Okay,
look
well,
that up.
the Process Church, supposedly Charles Manson was a member, but we don't know that for a fact. But they used to have meetings here in New York, and they were a coven, but you never could quite find out exactly what their you can Google them on the internet. They were kind of I think into Christianity and the occult, kind of as a combination. That would be like Gnostic or something, I believe. But they used to hold some very lively meetings and stuff. In fact, they had Betty Hill, the UFO abductee, came down and lectured, and I'm sure she probably didn't even know what the kind of group it was. But then we don't know what kind of group it was, really, except they were later associated with Charles Manson, but there was really no proof of that. And even if Charles Manson was a member, it doesn't mean that the group really had anything in common with him. I mean, you could belong to any group, actually, and probably hide whoever it is that you are. But for our listeners who may not be that familiar with Wicca, how would you describe Wicca, and how would you describe some people who think of it as a satanic cult? How can you set them straight on that?
Well, Wicca, if you look it up, and it basically follows a reed, and basically 8 words are, remembered more than all the other words together. And they are as follows. And it harm none, do what you will. And what that basically means is not to cause harm or bring any kind of harm to anyone, including oneself. Because if you do, then it can come back threefold law. Mentally, emotionally, and physically. And, it's karma. We're a lot of people might dispute what we are, but if you look us up, we're nature-based. We love nature. We look at the divine, Mother Earth, and the moon and the sun and things like that. We aren't violent. And a lot of people think, oh, well, you're witches, Then you go back to Hollywood and all this other stuff. And with all due respect, they see the, witches and stuff like that, or, things like that out of perspective. It's all bad. No, it's not. It's not all bad. You have good, you have bad, you have, evil and everything. That's why I said I'm a white witch. Not all Wiccans might be white witches or vice versa, but that's how I, term myself, because that's what I am. And I only practice white magic. I don't practice anything dark. I don't practice anything gray, because, again, that goes against my belief. I only practice what is good. I communicate with angels. I have my my angelic radio on all the time. I listen to the the messages from the higher self, and and that's what I'm all about, is to help portray goodness. I don't do evil. People have asked me, oh, you're bad, you're evil. No, they've told me that. And I'm like, no, I'm not, because if you truly know me, I'm not like that, and I'm not satanic by any means. I don't even believe in the devil per se. Because, I mean, is there good evil? I mean, good energy and there's bad energy, you know, but that's just my belief. But, you know, it's just, we're different. Like I said, I used to be a Christian. I was raised as a Baptist, but I never felt comfortable. I never felt at home, if you will, with that. So that's, you know, I started, you know, going down my own path, my own spiritual journey. And I'm very, very happy with where I am in my life right now.
Well, by saying that you don't believe in the devil, for a lot of these people, they're like, oh well, that'll send you straight to hell. You know, you don't believe in the devil. You don't believe in the devil. Oh, you're going to hell. And it's like, no, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense.
Exactly. I know. It's like that guy who told me that yesterday. I could have totally went into debate mode with him, but I didn't because, you know, what would that have proven? You know, it would have proven nothing. So,
I got my reservation in to go to hell, and I got a front row seat. That's the way.
Well, if I'm going to hell, let me sit right beside you because we can have some fun.
Okay. There you go. I'll be more than happy to do that. Just watch out. I'm kind of handy with a pitchfork.
Hey, that's all right, man.
I wonder how that ever got started. The pitchfork. Probably by some big corporation who couldn't sell them, so they had to come up with a way of marketing a pitchfork.
There you go. Yeah. Hey, we can put some marshmallows on that and roast them.
Well, I mean, it is. To me, it's funny, but I mean, I know that you know, being a Wiccan, that there are all sorts of misconceptions, you know, surrounding that, and there are a lot of people who are just, you know, already just to jump to conclusions without even taking the time to either talk to you or do the research yourself. So, you know, I can imagine that sometimes, you know, you're just like, if somebody would ask you, you're just like, oh, you know, I don't know, you just don't want to say anything.
Well, you know, I always tell people I don't want to dance on anybody's toes, you know, or take anyone off. But, you know, if you ever have a question, please just, you know, find me. You know, you can always go to SheilaReneeParker.com, go to my site. You know, I do have a contact Sheila Renee Parker page on that site. You can always ask me questions. You know, I'm very open-minded. I'm very open-spoken, if you will, you know, and there's no judgment on my site or anything. You know, I'm very positive vibes only type person, you know, and it's really funny that you say that. The title for someone who actually has the fear of witchcraft, they suffer from wiccaphobia. So the word Wicca is in the word wiccaphobia. So, and it's trippy though, because if you really knew me as a person, there's no reason to fear me or anybody else that I know that's Wiccan, you know. I mean, we're all laid back people, you know. But you know.
Some people, I think they just want to be afraid or enjoy hating, you know, whatever. But you know,
exactly.
Well, Tim, I mean, I hate to say this, bringing up that word, we have to go to our top of the hour break. So this is our long break, and we will continue with more from our guests when we come back on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre, and tonight our guests are Melissa Johnson and Sheila Parker, and we're going to bring Melissa back into the conversation again. And I wanted to ask Melissa now, and I didn't go and read them all, but in your bio, you've got like a long list of really interesting jobs. It seems like, running from joke and promo writer, television development executive to chief bean cook at an Ohio Taco Bell. I love that.
That was
go
a
ahead,
good
one. Well, I mean, most people wouldn't list something like that in their career, but you have no fear.
No, I've had a lot of different jobs throughout my life, especially when I was really young, which was when the Taco Bell job happened. And I learned something from all of them. They all gave me a skill that I carried with me one way or another. So, yeah, and I have a short attention span, so I like jumping around to different things for sure.
Well, okay. One of these things is that you said that you once nearly broke Baryshnikov's ankle during a rehearsal. Why don't you tell us about that? Because that's really interesting. And I looked all over your site and I couldn't find any other references to that. So I mean,
no.
are you free? Are you free to talk about this situation?
Sure. So,
all right, go for it then. First time ever.
Yeah. So I worked for a ballet company called Elliott Feld Ballet Tech in New York City. And it was in a building that had a lot of rehearsal spaces. So dance troupes would rent the rehearsal spaces periodically. And I was running to catch a telephone call. And there was Misha. He was stretching in the lobby. And I tripped and I fell. And I almost landed on him. But I really did contort myself in such a way that I took the brunt of the fall. Misha. So he was noticeably concerned, and so was everyone else, understandably. But we all had a good laugh about it, or I did later, much later.
Well, I could imagine though that Baryshnikov may not have took it with good humor, considering. His ankle, all that. I mean, it's paramount to his career.
Yeah, of course. It's his instrument, right? So I understood. Right. It's just a little awkward. It was the 90s. Platforms were in. I'm not a very coordinated individual. No one could call me a Firebird. So it happened, and it's good that that he didn't get a broken ankle.
Yeah. And
so
he did. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, and he didn't stand there and scream at you for 10 minutes afterwards.
No, of course not.
Oh, good.
Now, you were involved in producing shows?
Yeah. So I produced animation for about 20 years or so, and then I kind of, needed to take a break, and that's when Teacups kind of blossomed. So I just wanted a different career. I wrote and I produced animation for commercials, for television series, for shorts. I worked on a video game. So, yeah, I love animation, and I will always love animation. But
I want to ask you, when's the last time you hung out in the cemetery?
Oh God, in LA, we have this wonderful thing at Hollywood Forever Cemetery where they show movies. And so I don't know how they got the permission to do it. I should do a little more research on that. But, they have movies and you can just drive in and sit among, not right up against the tombstones or anything, but there's a designated area. But it's great to watch horror movies in the cemetery. So that would be the most recent time.
Cemeteries have fallen on hard times. In fact, there is a cemetery in Jersey City, not far away. And I go with my friend Carla, who runs Balance, the beautician. And every Halloween, they have a outdoor Halloween party in the cemetery. And so I guess it's an abandoned cemetery, maybe, or maybe nobody's caring for it too well. So they collect a few dollars at the door. You get to hear your heavy metal zombie music, and the money goes to keep the tombstones upright, I suppose. Yeah.
I love that. And when I was a kid, we lived in a funeral home for a little while. So, and I've always had a thing for cemeteries. There was one right behind my house when I was growing up that I would sort of creep on over to whenever I was feeling grumpy. And, there were woods behind my house, and then you walk through the woods and there was this giant cemetery, and it was magical. So that was that was probably my first love affair with cemeteries.
Well, we go up occasionally to the Albany Rural Cemetery, which is maybe 5 or 10 miles outside of the capital, New York here.
Mm-hmm.
And there is one of the oldest cemeteries in the country. In fact, Charles Fort, the entire Fort family is buried there. Charles Fort, of course, being the grandfather of the supernatural and author of Wild Talents and Low and Mysterious Disappearances and so forth. And there have been all kinds of a weird phenomena. We have an associate, Claudia Cunningham, who I call the MIB lady because she's had a few encounters and researched the Men in Black up yonder. But there have been incidences where cars have rolled down gravel roads, but you don't hear them traveling over the gravel. And they will get to an area that's fenced off or has a link chain over it and disappear. There is a couple dressed in pajamas carrying lit candles in their hand that pass over the tombstones on a frequent basis, and all kinds of other spooky stories. So, I mean, do you think that things are more prone to happen in cemeteries, or is it just because people are into that vibe there, or what's your thinking on cemeteries and the paranormal?
I think when I was a kid, I just wanted to go somewhere creepy and forbidden because it makes it more interesting. And I also think that that was my initial attraction to it. But then I started looking at all of the cemeteries' gravestones and really sort of calculating how old people were when they passed and what year they were born, and looking at the art and doing, scratchings of it. So that was my initial love of cemeteries. Do I think there's forces and energy there? Absolutely. I feel, if nothing else, it's a collection of sorrow of the people that are mourning. And you feel that. You have a respect for, their loss. My husband and I were actually got engaged in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. We used to live on. Yeah, I love that cemetery. It's beautiful. It's one of the older ones, actually. So I lived on one end of the cemetery. He lived on the other, and we used to walk through the cemetery to have our little dates. And one day we were walking through the cemetery, and he proposed, which is any goth girl's dream. Let's be honest.
Now, when you say goth girl, are you all are you fitted out with vampire fangs?
No, no, but I respect
no
it.
No
it's
cat's eyes or zombie's eyes.
No, but I respect that. No, I think I was probably more goth in high school. It was a good way to rebel against being different in general. So you have two options when you're different. You can either go with it, or you can rebel against it. And I just chose to embrace it and say, yeah, I'm weird. I'm weirder than you. I'm weirder than you. I'm weirder than you. And I don't know that I've ever really outgrown it. So do I look gothy today? I like black. I like wearing a lot of black. Sure.
Well, I had to go to NYU hospital today. And I was sitting in the blood lab, of all places. Mm-hmm. And I went with my friend April, and she says, "Do you notice that guy, young guy?" Because she's a hairdresser, and I don't know, she was commenting on his haircut and everything. And she said to me, "Did you notice his teeth?" I said, "No, I don't usually examine people's teeth." She said, "Well, he had silver fangs." And I noticed a couple of people were kind of, curious, and they were kind of talking to him. I didn't overhear the conversation, but I almost wanted to go up to him and ask him if he knew Father Sebastian. I don't know. Do you know who Father Sebastian is?
I'm afraid I don't.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, he runs a vampire. I don't know if you would call it a group or a cult or whatever.
Oh, yeah, I do know Sebastian. We just met. Yeah.
Oh, is that right? Well, I would think that everybody knows. Well, he made some fangs for our the people that were in our one of our horror movies, Barely Legal Lesbian Vampires: The Curse of Ed Wood. And he made some terrific fangs. And I remember everybody, and I said to myself, I bet you if I went up to this guy, he'd be really freaked out that I knew who Father Sebastian was. So there you go. That's my close connection to goth, and I've always been sort of a what would you call it, a closet goth.
Hey,
I wear the black just because I like black, but I used to go to some of the goth clubs. There was one, in fact, we did some filming in Newark, and I can't remember the name of it offhand, but I was somewhat
located
associated
across
with
the street
field,
from the post office. I remember that. It was located across the street from the post office.
There you go. Well, you could say maybe that was their dead letter office. Go ahead, Tim. I deserve that one, so you go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Back to the fangs for a second. I wonder what came first: his choice in in blood work or his fangs.
I don't
wonder.
Know. But I mean, okay. What if you don't mind me asking? Are you a Wiccan or Satanic or Aleister Crowley person or?
I'm a happy atheist, but I respect a person's right to choose their own religion, and whatever they want to do is fine as long as they don't, push it on me. I respect all religions.
That's kind of my. I'm a seeker for the truth, which most people are not. Unfortunately, they are blind faithists, if that's the word. I mean, they accept what their parents indoctrinated them in, or somebody came. I would assume that some people that come and knocking at your door, they must convert somebody, or they wouldn't come knocking at their doors anymore, right? I don't know. I'm a follower of the of OASP, which is darn difficult. It's a darn difficult book. If you can get through the 1,250 pages, 2-volume set of our OASP, I think you could be indoctrinated into any religion. There have been so many religions that have existed over the years. That's always intrigued me. I mean, I'm very much into spiritualism. I'm not necessarily a big believer in it, but I do equate the phenomena that takes place in the seance room to what happens at a UFO landing or an abduction or something. There are a great deal of parallels, and it's interesting, ectoplasm and all of that stuff. So it
19th century spiritualism specifically, or
well, it still goes on to this day. It's a little bit more undercover here. But there are spiritualist groups. There's Casadega and Camp Chesterfield. Tim, that's the one out in your neighborhood?
Yes, Camp Chesterfield. That's correct.
Okay. That has, I do believe now, I may be wrong, but there's a magazine we advertise in, a very well-produced publication, very, very glossy. You can get it at Barnes & Noble here, called Psychic News. It's from England. And it comes out monthly, and it's got some great articles in it. They've been around for like 80 years or something like that. It's kind of a house organ, or was, for the spiritualist movement. But they now have articles on Bigfoot and cryptozoology and UFOs, and they got to get with the times too. But they have had a couple of articles in the last few months about some of the relics that have been located that were in the original Fox sister home or dwelling, where the Knox started. Somebody found the Fox sister kettle, and a tea kettle. There you go, tea kettle. I bet you would like to have that in your collection. The Fox sister tea kettle, and it's now on display at one of the spiritualist museums, I believe Camp Chesterfield.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that way I'm sure it's well guarded there. In fact, they recreated. They were tearing down the house where the Fox sisters lived, and they took the building material and recreated it at Camp Chesterfield, so you could actually walk through the Fox sisters' home.
That's really cool.
And
I would love to do that.
Perhaps if you put your ear to the wall, Tim, you might hear some cracking of knuckles.
Or toes.
Or toes.
I think supposedly they use their toes as
they
well.
did, yeah.
Well, I think I would have liked to go out with those girls.
They were very flexible. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, we all like toes here. Anyway, maybe
Tim,
we
you'll find this interesting because I know that this is a favorite character for you, but on Melissa's website there was they had in December they had the Los Angeles Krampus Ball, where she has teacups and settings with Krampus images on it. One plate says "cookies for Krampus," and I know you're a big fan of Krampus.
Well, Joshua Ward got me into Krampus. I was a guest on his show, Speaking the Strange, and he was telling about the lore of Krampus, which I had never heard of, because basically, I guess it started in Iceland.
It's a Bohemian tradition, so Germany, the Czech Republic, I believe, also celebrates.
Yes, and I found out that Krampus was much more revered, or perhaps that's not the right word. That people were frightened of him, if you believe the stories. But I think about Christmas week, if there are noisy and unruly children in the neighborhood, you should make friends with him. And in fact, we do have a show or two that if you go to YouTube and Mr. UFO Secret Files and type in Krampus, I think you'll find a couple of shows that we've done, which I always go back and listen to around the holiday as I crack my nuts, what do you call them? Chestnuts and whatever they are. Yeah, chestnuts, yes.
Well, if you go and look at some of the old cards, especially from like the 19th century, that features Krampus, and I'm sure that this would be, if you've seen these, Melissa, and I'm sure you have, they must be a delight to you, because they are to me, where they're like holiday greeting cards, yet they have Krampus basically torturing crying children, beating them with like bird sticks and
absolutely.
Oh my God, they're wonderful, actually.
So many countries in Europe have a tradition of the helper, in quotes, to Santa, who goes around and punishes bad children, and we don't really have that here in the U.S.
It keeps down. I guess it keeps down Saint Nicholas's cost a little bit. If you gotta, that way you don't have to give gifts to all the kids. You can pre-select and give a lumps of coal. I don't know about lumps of coal though. Today they might be a little bit harder to get. You got to go to the White House maybe and find some. That seems to be that seems to be where the coal is stored. I don't know. We're getting back in the coal. Back in the
bringing coal back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bringing coal back. Yeah, that's really healthy for you. I got a hard time breathing as it is. Yeah, you always want 3 or 4. They hand down 3 or 4 families, with the people in your family with black lung disease or something like that. You got to do it.
Well, what was another thing interesting about a lot of these Krampus cards is that they continued on into the 1960s. I don't know. Had you ever see any of those, Melissa? They turned from beating children or stuffing them into a bag to take to be tortured and eaten, to almost like Playboy cartoon type of situations.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic. He became sort of the devil or the devil on your shoulder, the bad guy, and flirting with him was definitely a not forbidden thing for sure. But yeah, like I was saying, there isn't really a tradition of that so much in the United States, and so I'm really happy to see the resurgence of that tradition and people embracing it here in the U.S. It's fun. Can you imagine seeing?
We're doing our best to make a Krampus one of the gang.
Great. Yeah.
Indeed, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like you were saying, Melissa. Can you imagine, though? I mean, starting cards with Krampus images on it, here in the U.S. I'd love that.
Oh, well, we have our own little set of plates and cups that we do with cookies for Krampus on them, and they're quite popular at the Krampus ball in December each year, and we usually issue them.
Where is the ball?
The ball is down at the German Beer Garden it's near Long Beach.
All right, I'm going to have to interrupt you here because we have to go to our bottom of the break. So we will be back in just a few minutes on Exploring the Bizarre.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre, and here we are at the bottom of the hour, less than a half hour to go. So, Sheila, I wanted to ask you about your novel, The Spirit Within. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? And what was your inspiration for it?
Oh, my inspiration! It is a fictional story, of course, but I wanted it to be realistic to people, because I wanted people to be able to relate with it, like your everyday type story, but with a supernatural twist. Let me actually read to you the description, because it's the one that's on Amazon. If anyone wants to find my novel, The Spirit Within, it is available on Amazon. It's in Kindle format, or you can get the paperback. And the description on Amazon simply says, Cassandra Blakemore seems to have the life every girl her age wants. College, cute boyfriend, cool friends, loving relatives, except that cute mechanic and live-in lover Raleigh Nichols is sinking into the bottle and hitting her. Cassie isn't going to take it, of course. This all-too-familiar story comes with a supernatural twist that will delight every reader. And I'm currently, slowly but surely, working on the sequel to it right now as we speak. I'm halfway through with it. But I wanted my story to be a realistic base one, because unfortunately, abusive relationships do exist. But this story is a story of empowerment of the main character, Cassandra Blakemore, also known as Cassie. She finds her inner strength, her ability to finally face the challenges head on and to, overcome the adversity. And of course, there are challenges along the way. And all the while, she's discovering telekinesis, premonitions, and other things like that. And, as the story, even goes further, there's even more of a background to where she initially came from. I don't want to give, like spoiler alerts or anything like that. But then in the sequel that I'm working on actually delves even more into her storyline and even further back into her, why she has abilities. And, if you go into Amazon, I got some really amazing 5-star reviews and everything. So I recommend everyone to check that out. So, it's a fun story to write, and, any writer who is truly passionate about what they do, they really delve into it. So there are some parts in the book where I was all, jumping up and down with, cheers. And then there were other moments where I was actually full of tears because, a writer really gets into it. And that was me, full force. And so this next book, it's even more involved. So, I'll keep everyone posted. Like I said earlier about my website, go onto my website now, for all the updates and everything. So definitely do that.
Now, when I was doing more freelancing than I am now, because there's hardly that much freelancing to do, I was writing for various syndicates, international syndicates, and lots of different magazines, and I knew almost everybody in the lower end of publishing. I was not up there with Harper and Row. I was just down there with Row. But we I noticed when the big drugstore chain here in New York was, or probably still is, Duane Reade. And if you went down to the basement, there must have been thousands of paperback books. Do any of us remember what paperback books are? They used to go for 75 cents, $1. Then they went up to $2.95 and $3.95. But there were racks and racks and racks of paperback books, and I would say that 3/4 of them were romance novels, the Candlelight series and Silhouette, and I don't remember. Those were the two big ones. Would you say? Well, I don't think that any genre is as big as something like that would have been at the time, because they were pumping out thousands of books. Where today you've got a heck of a lot of competition on Amazon. Would you say that there is a good interest, a large interest in what would you call your books? Gothic novels, or?
Well, The Spirit Within is actually classified as a paranormal romance because there's a love triangle within the story, and so she's faced with two loves, and she's having to choose between. Like I said, I'm trying not to give out any like spoiler alerts or anything like that, but with a supernatural twist, and because there is, she discovers telekinesis, she discovers, premonitions and, levitation and things like that. So that's what makes it have, a little bit of both worlds. So, but
would you say the genre is fairly large for that kind of book?
Oh yes, absolutely. Because, being a writer and everything, I see that so much with my writing and everything, as I research, because, that's, what you do, when you're writing and everything, you want to constantly, broaden your horizon and everything. And the paranormal romance genre, it really is large right now. I mean, it's got a huge following with so many different amazing, writers out there. And like you were saying, the competition is out there. Not only do you have all of these amazing publishing companies, but you also have the spectrum of self-publishing. Oh, yeah. That makes it even more challenging for a lot of people nowadays.
It's kind of hard to tell the difference today. I would say self-publishing is if you got one or two books. If you got 3 or 4 or more, you're a publisher. I mean, you're a publisher, man. Whether they, I've been publishing for 50-something years, man. In fact, I just reprinted the first book I ever published when I was like 14 or something. Somebody found a copy of it and sent it to me, and I said, why should I leave this off of my backlist? And I put it out, and I mainly did it to give away to people. Well, I've sold, some copies of it, keep the price real low on it. And if they want to know what Tim was doing at the age of 14 or 15, he was doing Inside the Saucers and a few other UFO type books. But there are so many creative people, and of course. The thing is, you can't really judge a book by its cover anymore. I suspect, because most of the books are pretty colorful, and that doesn't necessarily mean the writing is all that great. But if you're buying, I would start out buying the Kindle edition of a book, and if you find out you like to write it, then go to the printed version. Except on our books, do not buy the Kindle version, buy the printed book, because it's a more lively experience, because we have a lot of artwork and photos and stuff in there. Melissa, are you a writer?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. I am a writer. How are you? Yeah, I am a writer. I like to write memoir primarily, though.
Memoir.
Memoir. I'm working on a memoir about my family and growing up in Ohio in our creepy, possibly haunted house. Yeah.
And okay, but no, you're not I'm not a fiction person myself. I've never Well, some people might say that's not true, but I've always been a more of a researcher and a documentarian. And if people ask me what I do, like in my apartment, because all of these books, I tell them now that I'm an archivist.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that seems much more scholarly.
Yeah, that sounds very fancy.
Yeah,
rather
fancy,
than
yes.
rather than hoarder.
yes, rather than hoarder, yes. But I am the only larger book collection that I know of outside of being in private libraries would be Paul Eno's. If you go down to Paul Eno, of course he does his own show and he's a guest frequently on this program. If you go down to his basement or subterranean cavern, it's loaded with books. It kind of curves around this way and that way, and you could find a back shelf somewhere. And he has a more he lives in New England, of course, which has a long valued history, not just on the paranormal, but on a lot of other subjects. And he has quite a few. I guess we would call them, and there's a word for it, but antique books or semi-rare books. So some of them having to do with the lore and legends of New England.
Oh, that's really cool. So
yeah.
I also love old books. When I was a kid, my mother used to buy me boxes and boxes of books from garage sales, and she didn't know what was in those boxes. She just wanted me to read. You know, that was her way of getting me to read lots of crazy things, and I did. I read everything, and so I love a good old book. And I wish that my entire house was big enough so that I could have nothing but books in it.
That does get to be that's one thing you have to say about Kindle. You can store a pretty much unlimited a number on your device, but
Yeah.
I have a hard time reading. I want to read the book, and I often fall asleep with it in my hands. But that's part of the comfort and joy of having a book, you know. And I sit there and I read
the smell
the book.
of a paperback.
Well,
Yes,
I'm allergic. I am allergic to dust, so that makes it kind of hard. Even I have files upon files upon files of people sending me their paranormal experiences and their UFO encounters and stuff. And as much as I'd like to go back and read the older files, if I open the drawers, I start sometimes even breaking out, which is an unfortunate. Experience. So, what is on your docket? I mean, what do you plan? How are you going to take this in the future?
Is that a question for me or for?
Both of our guests. But let's start with Melissa, since.
Well, I am working on my memoir. I'm writing it over and over and rewriting it and cooking it until it's done. And I'm hoping to, at some point, publish it. It's essentially a story of my crazy collecting / hoarding family and their love of antiques and our Arab background and coming over from Lebanon and being bootleggers. It's a hodgepodge of everything that's happened to me throughout my life.
Now, you say Arab background.
Mm-hmm.
Does the Arab countries, some of them have a rich interest in the occult dating back centuries?
I wouldn't know too much about that, unfortunately, but I have heard great stories about exorcisms in the Middle East, but that's as far as my knowledge on that subject goes.
We have had several guests on speaking about the jinn. The jinn being, some people think of them as just demonic beings, but that's not necessarily true, as I understand it, Tim. Right? That the jinn have a kind of a culture of their own, gypsies, like gypsies. They wander and
according to the folklore. According to the folklore, they were created first before us, and they were created from smokeless fire. Smokeless fire, and but somewhere along the lines they pissed God off. So they got sent to like another realm, kind of like a parallel world almost next to us, but they're not demonic. I mean, there's good ones and there's bad ones, just like us. But I guess that they don't have a great love for us because they got kicked out of this world and we're still here. Mm-hmm. They want to come back.
and then I think of Abracadabra and the Aladdin's magical lamp. And I've always been fascinated with the flying carpet, which I don't quite understand too much about. But I live on a street here in Manhattan where there used to be all carpet stores. They've all, I won't say got out of business, but they moved to take, because we're being encroached upon by high rises and hotels. But they always used to throw these swatches out into the trash or on the sidewalk. I wanted to recover them and sell a flying carpet magical kit. Give you a little bottle of oil, a couple of stones, because I certainly had the swatches, and most of them were Arabs that were selling the rugs. So I don't think that. But my staff here said that no, I shouldn't do that. It sounded too much like a come on or a hoax or something like that. But no, I don't know. We need to do some. We did a book, Tim, that on the winged creatures, weird winged creatures, and we did have a couple of stories and even a photograph in there of a flying horse.
That's right.
So
right. No flying carpets, though.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I didn't Google for that.
Every other kind of mysterious flying thingy, but no flying carpet. I guess we'll have to include that one in our next book.
Well, we could do just a book on that. Well, I always did want to do a book. Maria DeAndrea, who of course works with us closely, she did a book recently, which is using the power of the jinn and the magic Aladdin's lamp, which is very popular because we do have a Aladdin's lamp that we sell with incense and oil and stuff along that line. But okay, so we're getting, I guess, pretty close up here on the end of the program.
Before I wanted to ask Sheila before we run out of time. Yes. Now, with your book now. Did you follow with, because you have supernatural paranormal elements in your book? I mean, did you stay true to reality, whatever that may be, in your book? Because I've read a lot of books along, these lines, fictional, and they just really, a lot of times they really get outrageous. They really get crazy. So I always appreciate reading a book where the author is obviously familiar with actual, paranormal events and things like that. I mean, did you follow that reality within your book?
To an extent with this one, yes, I did. Now with this next one, it is going to be more intense and more in depth with these supernatural abilities and things like that with the sequel. But with the first one, with The Spirit Within, it was more low key as far as, if it was a movie, there wouldn't be like explosive, like supernatural effects or anything like that. It would be more realistic, like what you were talking about, and more, natural type things. So I tried to keep it as real to an extent as I possibly could, because again, I wanted it to be something that, the reader, when they read it, they're like, oh, wow, that could have happened to me. Or because I have heard of stories like that to, happen to other people. So, I just try to keep it as, I don't know, as pretty interesting as I could without going too outlandish, mm-hmm. and without making it, I didn't want to dull it down too much because I didn't want it to be boring or anything, of course. But, I try to keep it as real as I could with a supernatural twist that would, keep people, interested in it as well. Because I've had people tell me, they're like, wow, I couldn't put that down. I read it in the course of a weekend. I was like, wow, thank you. So I really appreciate that and everything. So, like I said, there's levitation in it, there's telekinesis, there's premonitions and things like that. So, yeah.
Well, and I mean, had the things, some of the things that you put in this book? I mean, had you had personal experiences along those lines?
Telekinesis, I've never experienced that. The ability to do things with my mind like that, I think that would be pretty awesome because, I mean, if you're sitting there on the couch and you want the remote control to come into your hand, I would love to have that. But as far as premonitions go, yeah, I've had premonitions in the form of dreams. And people were like, they would ask me, how can you tell they're not just regular dreams? Because me having a premonition is far different than having a dream. And anyone who has premonitions, they can easily, differentiate the two, and they know exactly what it's like because my premonitions don't stop until they happen. To whereas if I have a dream, it's just a dream and that's it, and it's over. But telekinesis, like I said, I've never had that. Levitation, of course, I've never been able to do that. But if you, do your research and everything, there have been studies to where people have done that. Actual, scientifically proven, who knows? But there have been countless reports of people doing that. So, I try to keep it interesting.
Well, and it's like you said, there are people that throughout history that seem to be almost like haunted people. I mean, they're just constantly surrounded by this kind of paranormal activity. Whether or not it's coming from within or outside sources, it's hard to say.
Right. I mean, and scientifically proven, who's to say, because there have never been like super, scientific actual accounts, proven. But as far as the countless reports throughout the years, even centuries and so on and so forth, I mean, in my opinion, there's got to be some sort of basis for that, because how can you have so many reports from all over the world in regards to the same thing if it didn't exist, if that makes sense?
Yep. All right. Well, Tim, it looks like that we got about 4 minutes left in the program. So I guess
you mean the clock is approaching midnight. I always say something like the pumpkin or pumpkins. Yes. Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to do a show like this around the Halloween. I would think, but we certainly covered a lot of strange and bizarre territory this evening, and of course we keep ourselves especially busy trying to ward off all the ghosts and goblins and things that go bump in the night, and turn our things to a more positive nature. Although I can't really say that our next book fits into that category, because it is called UFO Hostilities and the Evil Alien Agenda.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Oh boy, lethal encounters with the extraterrestrials exposed. Not out yet, but our graphics department, headed by Bill Kern, is busily working on it into the night, and it's going to be over 400 pages. Ooh. And I know that people like to see UFOs as sweetness and light and Space Brothers types, but it's not all. It's not all of that. I mean, it's the airplanes have been brought down out of the sky. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people have mysteriously disappeared. Entire towns in coastal Brazil have been pulverized, I believe that would be a good word, by some sort of a strange laser type weapons that have injured people, and we have cases of people being having encounters with UFOs and having radioactive poisoning after that, and died under very strange circumstances. So that should be available in just a week or so. UFO Hostilities, and anything on your side of the your side of the woods there, Tim.
Well, starting tomorrow.
You're gonna be on Tesla Files on the History Channel.
Yeah, starting tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a limited series show. I have no idea which episode I'm going to be on, so watch them all. But I wanted to ask our guests just really quick, Melissa, where can our listeners find out more about you?
They can check out my website, which is misshavishamscuriosities.com.
All right. And Sheila, how about you?
SheilaReneeParker.com.
All right. Well, great.
Wonderful evening of the bazaar, Tim.
Yes.
And I in fact, I feel that all the spirits and the ghosts are just walking out the door for the evening. They're shaking their heads and waving at me as they disappear into the night. And I want to thank our producer, Tina, Carol, our trusted associate, April and Earl, that's our adopted cat, and of course you, Tim, and Brad Steiger. Blessings to you, and get well, my dear friend.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.